Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 16. Part 16 of our reading of Alfred Hitchcock Presents Stories Not for the Nervous, and the story is probably going to be Dune Roller by Julian May. Now, first of all, we're going to go over the copyright information, of course. We says the author gratefully acknowledges the invaluable assistance of Robert Arthur in the preparation of this volume. This is all the publishing information here, if you're into that kind of stuff, all the copyright information, and all the different printings. This is an earlier printing, and I will be giving away a copy of this book from a later printing, but that will be coming a little bit later. Also, we are going to have the acknowledgments, which I'm going to put on the screen right now while we read. In the last one, Jean was on the boat, and she's looking astern because something is off. And meanwhile, Dr. Thorne and Ian are talking over the ham radio, and we're going to see what's going on. Cleanly, powerfully, Carlin sized through the waves, pursuing the shadow of herself. The shadow was long and very black, a boat with a searchlight, thought Jean, and looked astern. It was there, riding high in the dark, choppy water, a great glowing globe of phosphorescence not 20 yards off the stern. It was coming after her, rapidly overtaking the cruiser. She screamed then, and when the thing came on, she opened the throttle and attempted to outmaneuver it, but the great glowing monster would pause when she veered and spiraled, then overtake her easily when she tried to run away. The motors on the motors of the Matthews throbbed in the hull beneath her feet, and she tried to urge them to a speed they were never meant for. The thing was drawing closer. She could see trails of water streaming from it. What was it? What would it do if it caught her? Bigger ones. Her eyes turned with horror to the tiny drop on its silver chain. Its glow was a perfect miniature of the monstrous thing in the water behind her. She sobbed as she wrenched Carlin's wheel from side to side in hysterical frenzy. Across the cabin, the quiet voice of Ian was telling McInnes how to rig the pan adapter as a frequency monitor. Ian! And if you're ever in a jam, with tears streaming down her cheeks, she set the automatic pilot and fumbled with the little amateur transmitter that had been built into the locker. She had seen her uncle use it only once and turned it on. She thought, but how? That turned it on, she thought, but how did she know it was set right? Or did you set these things? The little panel wore 3 switches, 2 knobs, a dial, and a little red light. Naturally, Kirk McInnes had not labeled the controls of an instrument he had built himself. The panel was innocent of any such clutterment. Carlin tore through the night. The glowing thing was less than 15 yards behind. Janine wept wildly, and the placid voices over the receiver spoke sympathetically of the ruining of Thorne's beach pool by the storm. Oh, those knobs and switches. This one. Then this one, she thought. No, that won't be right. The transmitter might not even be on the air at all. Or she might be in some part of the band where Ian and her uncle would fail to hear her. But what was she supposed to do? And she couldn't read this funny tuning scale. I've got to swell mobile VFO in Carlin, said McInnes. What's VFO? Said Sapel. In Mac's case, it means very frequently offhand. Laughter. Oh, what difference does it make? What could he do to help her? The brilliance of the huge thing was lighting up the water for yards around. The calm voices floated from the receiver, and the globe drew closer than it had ever before. She clawed at the standby switch of the radio, and suddenly her sobs and the beat of the engines were the only sound in the deck house. She would try. That was all she would that was all. She would try to reach Ian and pray that her uncle had left the transmitter set to the correct frequency. "Ian!" she cried, then remembered to press the button on the side of the little hand microphone, forcing back her tears, and said, "Ian, Ian, can you hear me?" Trembling, her hand touched the receiver. "Gene!" The sound burst into the deckhand. "Is that you? What are you doing?" "It's after me, Ian," she screamed. "A glowing sphere, 15 feet high. It's chasing the boat." "The boat?" came McGuine's voice numbly. She took it to Muskegon. "Gene, listen to me. I don't know whether this will do you any good, but we must try. You must do exactly as I say. Do you hear me?" "I hear you, Ian. The thing is almost on top of the boat. Listen. Listen to me, darling. You have that little amber drop somewhere on the boat. Do you remember? The little amber drop I gave you. Get it? Take it and throw it overboard. Throw it as far as you can. The amber drop. Now tell me if you heard me." "Yes, I hear you. The drop. The drop." It danced on its little silver chain, and the light in its core was bright and pulsating and warm. She tore it from its place over the wheel and groped back to the open cockpit of the cruiser. She clung for a full minute to the canopy stanchion, blinded by the golden light. And then the small drop arched brightly over the water, even as a meteor had many centuries past. The light reflecting off the walls, painted a flat, clinical white, was full of blurry, fuzzy forms. They might have been almost anything, Thorne thought, and he shuddered as he thought of what they might have been. A table, for instance, with a burden that had sprawled and made black all along one side. Without moving his head or changing his expression, he squeezed his eyes shut very slowly and opened them again, but it was not the medical examiner's office. It was the waiting room of the little local hospital, and Willie Seppel was sitting beside him on the leather couch. Through the open window behind lowered blinds, a clovery night breeze stirred, parting the smoke that filled the room and turning a page of the magazine that Seppel was staring at. A young man of 25 or so sat across the room from them and ate prodigious quantities of lifesavers. "My wife," he said. He had grinned nervously at them. "Our first." The persons in the waiting room could see through the open doors to a room at the end of the hall. People in white would periodically enter and leave this room, but another grimmer group, which had entered nearly an hour ago, had not come out. "Willie, I'm going nuts," Thorne burst out at last. "What are they doing in there? You'd think they'd at least let me see her." "Easy. It'll be any minute now." He proffered a gold cigarette case, but Thorne shook his head. "Why don't you lie back and try to relax?" Seppel said. "You've been crouching there staring at the floor until your eyes look like a pair of burned-out bulbs. What good do you think you're going to do her in that kind of shape?" Thorne sank back and lay with the back of his hand shading his eyes. If he could have been there when they brought her in, but it takes time to find where an unmanned boat is drifting or has drifted. Time. While he sat before his receiver with nothing to do but wait. The hands of the clock had wound around to 1 a.m. before the call finally came, and he knew she was saved. It was 3:30 now. McInes and his wife were in there with her. He looked despairingly down the white corridor and waited. The sound of her voice, made broken and breathless by weeping, rose again in his mind. She had said the thing was 15 feet high, the big one itself, and it could have. This wouldn't do at all. The memory of his dream the previous night stood out in his mind with horrible clarity. The bright golden sun and the little burned things. But infrared doesn't burn. The bright golden sun. Sun, said Dr. Thorne to himself very quietly. Said Sepel. Son, he repeated firmly. Willie, do you think the same way? Nope. If I hit you, how do you think? Mad, said Sepel with a winning smile. But if you figure the best way to sneak out of here without being seen, how do you think rationally? I've been thinking about the drops again. You know, we've got a pretty serious discrepancy in that so-called properties of the things. We've proved the infrared emission, but infrared doesn't sear flesh. That's what I've been trying to tell you, said Sepel with patience. Nonetheless, I'm convinced that the big one Jean saw is the thing that did in the tramp. Now, what if the energy emitted is not always infrared? What if the infrared is a sort of involuntary result of the blows we gave the drop, while ordinarily it is aroused to give off another wave? Wavelength. Say something in the visible with a lot of energy. Say that drop shape could focus into a beam. Sepel didn't say a thing. Silence precipitated heavily. The young man in the chair opposite then shifted his position and stared at them with gaping awe. Scientists! There was a sketchy swish, a starchy swish, and a nurse appeared in the doorway. Thorne started to his feet. Can we... Mr. D'Angelo, she beckoned coolly. It's a boy. Will you follow me, please? The young man gave a joyous, inarticulate cry and rushed out of the room. Thorne dropped back. Ye gods, he muttered. You've really got bad, haven't you? Sepel marveled. Oh, Willie, shut up. You know I'm not interested in her because of the thing that chased her. And wipe that look off your face. Between you and McInes, a man doesn't have a chance. Sepel looked slightly hurt. I'm sorry, Thorne apologized briefly. He walked around the room. The young man with the new son had been so anxious to leave that he had forgotten his lifesavers. Thorne ate one. It was wintergreen. He hated wintergreen. Sepel yawned delicately, then leaned forward and glanced out the door. Someone's coming, he warned softly. A tall man in a uniform of summer tans had left the room at the end of the corridor and walked purposefully towards the waiting room. Sepel rose to his feet and as the man entered the room. He said, Good evening, or rather, good morning. Is there something I can do? My name is Cunningham, commander of the Coast Guard cutter Manistique. Are you Mr. Ian Thorne? My name is Sepel. This is Mr. Thorne. Won't you sit down? Thanks, I will. To Thorne, who stood with his hands rudely clasped behind his back, he said briskly, Mr. Thorne, at 9 this evening, your amateur station contacted our base with information that the cruiser Carlin was in difficulty off the mainland, somewhere between Port Grand and Muskegon. It wasn't me, it was Kirk McInes. Thorne was not interested in brisk nautical gentlemen. We found the cruiser drifting out of gas some 7 miles off the Port Grand Light. Miss Wright, the operator of the craft, was found lying unconscious on the cockpit floor. I've just seen her. How is she? Thorne cut in. The doctors say she is suffering from shock, but other than that, they can't find a thing wrong with her. Now, what I'd like to know, is she conscious? Has she been able to talk? She's very weak, and what she says makes no sense. I think perhaps you might be able to help us on that score. Okay. Thorne looked at the guardsman narrowly. We were conversing with her over the radio when she suddenly seemed to become disturbed and evidently fainted. Didn't McInes tell you anything? Asked Sapel. No. Quiet, Willie, Thorne said. She seemed to be trying to tell us that someone was chasing her, Cunningham persisted. Are you sure that... Oh. Are you sure she had nothing in her... Okay, someone was chasing her, Cunningham persisted. Are you sure that she said nothing in her talk with you that could give a hint of the trouble? I knew there was something wrong from the sound of her voice, that's all. When she didn't answer, Mr. McInes radioed the Coast Guard, and we found her after a 4-hour search. The young lady was very lucky that she ran out of gas. Her automatic pilot had the cruiser headed straight out into the middle of the lake. There was nothing else on the water near her. Oh, there was? Nothing else on the water near her? The lake was empty, Cunningham paused and said casually. Was there something you expected us to find, Dr. Thorne? Certainly not. I was just wondering. I see. The officer got to his feet. I don't mind telling you, gentlemen, that I think there's something you're not letting me know. My job is done, and it's true that legally I have no business questioning you at all, but my business is keeping the waterways safe. The young lady in the room down the hall didn't faint from nervous exhaustion or hunger. Something scared the heck out of her there on the lake. If you know what it was, I wish you'd tell me. Have you ever read any science fiction, Commander Cunningham? Sapel asked, toying with his golden cigarette case. Rather belatedly, he said, Cigarette? The Coast Guardsman took one with suspicious thanks. Are you trying to tell me that the little green Martians have put outboards on their rocket ships and are chasing the pleasure crafts on our lake? Thorne said harshly. What Dr. Sapel means is that we have reason to believe that a highly unusual occurrence was responsible for tonight's unpleasantness. I don't like to mince words, Commander. I think I do know what was out there last night, and I'm not going to tell you. I can't begin to prove my suspicion, and I have a rather intense aversion to being laughed at. I have no intention of laughing, Mr. Thorne, but if you have information related to marine safety, let me remind you that you have an obligation to report it to the proper authorities. Proper authorities are not notorious for their sympathy. They'll laugh in my face. No, thank you, Commander. Until I have proof, I say nothing. The door at the end of the corridor opened once more and closed softly. Kirk McInes and his wife came down toward the waiting room. Thorne started up. She wants to see you, son, McInes said tiredly. She's a little stronger now, and she's asked for you. I'm taking Ellen back home. This has been pretty raw for her. I'm all right, his wife said stiffly. She clutched a damp, tightly balled lace handkerchief, but her features were immobile. Will Jean be all right? Thorne asked brokenly. She'll be fine, said McInes, clapping him on the back. Now get down there and see her before those medics decide she can't have any more visitors. I'm there now, and thanks, Mac. He disappeared down the corridor. The engineer and his wife left quietly. Thorne is a good man, Sapel said, even if he is a trifle mule-headed. His bright blue eyes looked humorously into the half-angry face of the Coast Guard officer. He laughed, moved over on the leather couch and said, Sit down here, Commander. Have another cigarette. Have a lifesaver, I'm going to tell you a singular story. It was shortly before lunchtime in Thorne's Dune Lodge, but the bubbling beaker on the range that Willie Sapel was stirring exuded a decidedly unappetizing aroma, pungent, acidic, and an organic kind of way, with noisome and revolting overtones. The fumes finally brought indignant remarks from Thorne. "Look," he said, peering into the doorway and holding his nose, "I'm the last one to criticize another man's cooking, but will you tell me what in heaven's name that is?" "Oh, just a bit of digestive juice," said Sepple cheerfully, turning off the gas and removing the beaker with a pair of pot holders. He carried his foul steaming container into the workroom. Thorne fled before him. "I suppose it's better not to ask where you got it," he said, from the sanctity of the radio room. "Don't be silly," said Sapel. "I merely rated your enzymes and warmed up a batch. Just an idea." He took the little drop. He took the little drop out of its container and set it on the table beside the beaker. "I thought since digestive juices provoked it into emitting once, it might do it again." Thorne regarded him dubiously. "I only wish," Sapel went on to say, "that the grapefruit-sized one hadn't escaped." He sat the drop in a loop of plastic and dipped it into the brew. "Take it easy with that one, Willie. It's the only link we have to the big one." "So you think they can communicate too?" said Sapel, without looking up. "I don't know whether it's communication, or sympathetic vibration, or the call of the wild, but the thing did follow Jean because of the little drop in the boat, and it disappeared when it got what it wanted. The grapefruit heard the grapefruit Mama too, and got away. I'll bet if that little one had been strong enough to get through your fancy insulation, it would have disappeared along with the other one." "And the two tracks merge into one," said Sapel, testing the soaked drop in a thermocouple. Nothing happened, as the rustic detective was heard to remark. "They were two sets of footprints leading to the scene of the crime, and only one set leading away. I wonder what kind of a molecular bond that transparent envelope has." He felt the drop in his finger the drop with his finger, shrugged and went and put it back in the juice. "The big globe killed the tramp, if my idea is correct," said Thorne. "He must have seen the thing coming out of the lake, turned to beat it, and fell on his face, and I think he picked exactly the wrong place to fall." "On grapefruit," Sapel agreed. "All Mama wanted to do was to pick up her offspring. She couldn't help it if there was a body in the way. But she killed just the same," said Thorne. "Those old Dune Roller stories hint that she may have done it before." He fished the miniature drop out of the liquid and looked into the yellow heart meditatively. "And Willie," he said abstractly, "unless something is done soon, she'll do it again." During the days that followed, Dr. Thorne went about his work with quiet preoccupation, and this in itself was enough to make Sapel more than a little suspicious. He rarely mentioned the drops, although he visited Jean every day, carrying sheaves of flowers and boxes of candy and fruit. Sapel went along on those pilgrimages for the ride, but almost always tactfully declined visiting the sick room, and hiked out instead to the Coast Guard station for a parley with his new ally, Commander Cunningham. Anxiety furrowed Sapel's pink forehead as he paced up and down the officer's headquarters. "He's got something up his sleeve," he maintained. "He goes off in the jeep in the morning and doesn't come back until noon. When I ask him where he's been, he says that he just went into town to see Jean, but visiting hours are from 2 to 4. If he doesn't go to the hospital, where does he go? Cunningham shrugged and picked up a folded newspaper that lay on the table. Have you seen this, Willie? It might explain a few things. Mystified, Sipel read aloud. We pay cash for certain unusual minerals, highest prices, free pickup, samples wanted all around, semi-transparent amber colored, with metallic veining. Hurry, right today, box 236, Port Grand, Michigan. Sipel stared aghast. I take it you weren't acquainted with this, the officer said. He walked to the window and looked down at a fruiter streaming through the channel. Do you know what he plans to do? No, but I know what I'd do. There's some kind of an attraction between the big globe and the drops, a force that draws the little ones home to Mama when they get her call. We found that out with a drop at Thorne's Lodge, but that attraction is so great that it works the other way too. Little Miss Wright told you that. If the drops can't come, if we hold them back, Mama comes after her children. That's what Thorne will probably count on. It was Cunningham's turn to stare. You mean he'll use the drops from the ad for bait? Sipel said gently. What's a man to do, Rob? He can't let go free. The fellow that finds the monster has three choices. He can run home, he can hide under the bed and pretend he didn't see it at all. He can try to inform the proper authorities, or he can attempt to dispose of the monster himself. Thorne knows nobody will believe him. Thorne knows that nobody will believe his Dune Roller story, so he doesn't waste time convincing people. Cunningham turned abruptly from the window and said violently, You aren't going to start on me too, are you, Willie? Sure, here I am, one slightly used but still serviceable authority. I believe your darn Dune Roller yarn, for some reason or for other. But it doesn't do any good. I'd earn the highest hee-haw from here to the Straits of Mackinac if I tried to initiate an official search for a round, glowy thing 15 feet high. The world won't unite simply because Michigan has itself a monster. You know. And what can I do? Even if I take the Manistique out, maybe Ian Thorne knows how to catch monsters, but I certainly don't. You want to let him go on, I suppose, Sipel said. He added a little wistfully, I had to see him get... I'd hate to see him get his hide fried off when he's just beginning to think about settling down. You watch him, that's all, and let me know when you think he's going to pull something. I'll do everything I can. He glanced at his watch. I have to get out of here now, Willie. Keep your eyes open. All we can do is wait. Okay, and we have really gone over the time limit here. We have been reading from Dune Roller. This is by, we'll probably be done with it next time. It's by Julian May. Also, we've been reading from Alfred Hitchcock, Stories Not for the Nervous. If you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, if you want to support me in any way, all the information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.